Hello, Miss Franchesca. It's been a while since our last little chat. Our last chat, we talked about how being colorblind is not a racist thing. You know, in your video, you try to make the assertion that if people are colorblind, that they are being racist in some kind of way. But it doesn't make any sense. If you want people to not be racist, then they shouldn't see things on the basis of color. They should judge people on the content of their character. Maybe you didn't hear what I said. I really don't know. But here we are yet again with another video. This time, you're trying to debunk 4 air quotes myths about Black Lives Matter, which is a very racist organization on its face. It has black in the title, so you already know it's a black identity group. If you were to have white in the title of any kind of identity group, it'd instantly be labeled as racist, double standard. Some people say that you can't be racist if you're black. That makes no sense. People just making up words and adhering to them, but I digress. I just want to get straight into your video that you created here. I kind of wanted to debunk some of your debunking and also give you a little bit more information that you may or may not be privy to at this current point in time. So let's get straight into it, shall we?
If you've ever heard someone say, but what about black on black crime? We've got you covered.
Haha, that's what you think.
Scrolling through your Facebook feed, you'll probably see articles and arguments about Black Lives Matter. A lot of people are mad or just confused about this movement.
Well, I don't think people are mad or confused. I just think that they recognize what's going on. Black Lives Matter is a very dangerous organization that spreads a lot of hate that weak people internalize and go out and harm people. But maybe I'm wrong about that. So let's go ahead and just let you talk and see what you have to say.
So here are responses to 4 questions you might hear when talking about Black Lives Matter. Oh, so you care about black lives? Then why aren't you talking about black on black crime?
That would be the $1 trillion question. That is the biggest elephant ever found in any room in the history of man.
First off, this assumes that the black community isn't worried about gun violence, which isn't true. For example, Ceasefire in Chicago is an organization that actually intervenes in local street and gang fights. There's even a documentary about them called The Interrupters.
That was a great movie promo and or plug. I'm not saying you got paid for it. I'm just saying it was a good plug, but I digress. Now, what does that particular group have to do with Black Lives Matter? If you say that Black Lives Matter, then you should be worried about the chief taker of those lives, logically. And the chief taker of black life is black on black crime.
Black Lives Matter isn't just about the loss of life, which is always terrible. It's about the lack of consequences when black lives are taken at the hands of the police.
Okay, now here's a question. How many times have you seen a case where an officer was clearly in the wrong with irrefutable evidence where they got off? I mean, you tell me, because I've seen officers get locked up, go to jail. I mean, look at what happened with Walter Scott. You know, the guy that did that, he's in jail right now. People get fired from their jobs, even when there's not a case of murder or anything like that. Just basic misconduct, they go to jail and or they get fired. So I don't really see the injustice.
When a civilian has committed a violent crime, they're generally arrested, tried, and then convicted.
Now, generally, I mean, what do you mean? What does generally mean? Because I know in Chicago, as far as the murder rate is concerned, you got 75% of these cases that are unsolved. In New York City, 50% plus are unsolved, right? So when you say they generally go to jail, they generally get arrested, etc., what do you really mean? Do you mean out of those that actually get caught? Do you mean out of those that have people actually turn them in? People that violate the whole no snitching rule in the hood?
Conversely, there's a lot of evidence that it's very rare to secure an indictment against a police officer for excessive force. And an indictment is just a trial. It's not even a conviction.
Well, that's because there's probably not that many cases where there's strong evidence against a police officer for excessive force.
Also, black on black crime isn't a thing.
Oh boy, here we go. This is the biggest lie you've ever told. Black on black crime is most certainly a thing. Do you know that black folks is only 13% of the population, account for half of the nation's murders on both sides of the gun? That means the victim and the perpetrator. How can you say that black on black crime is not a thing with those kinds of statistics? It doesn't make any sense. You can't sit there and tell me that something is not happening when I see it happen every day. This is most certainly a thing, and it's the most damaging thing to the black community and to the whole nation, because not only do we victimize each other at a high rate, we victimize everybody else at a high rate as well. If Black Lives Matter really cared about black lives, then they would tackle the biggest thing affecting the black lives, which is the scourge of black on black crime.
84% of white murder victims were killed by another white person. But we don't call it white-on-white crime. That's because our communities are still very segregated. So if you have the misfortune of being the victim of a crime, the perpetrator will most likely look like you.
Okay, Ms. Franchesca, I'm glad you brought this stat up. This is perfect timing. This number always seems to get brought up whenever somebody's trying to squash the conversation about black on black crime. They say, hey, look at this number. Whites kill each other as well at 84%. That means that everybody kills each other at a high rate, but that does not tell the actual rate. All that tells is the percentage among the race that kills each other, but that does not tell the actual rate of death. Now, let's deal with this first number for a moment, and then we'll deal with the other number, which you must have in order to understand black on black crime. Now, you say 84% of whites kill each other. Okay, cool. So if we're going to assume that, let's assume that the other 16% are black people that kill whites. Now, if blacks kill each other at 95%, then that means the remaining 5% are white. So do you see something wrong with that? Only 5% of blacks are killed by whites, but 16% of whites are killed by blacks, even though blacks are only maybe about 12.6 to 13% of the population at best, and whites are 65%. And in many of these FBI stats you may look at, whites also includes Hispanics, which are about 17% of the population. So you're talking about 82% of the population, 16% of that population being killed by less than 13%. Do you see the problem with that? Right? Now let's get to the other stat that you actually need to have in order to understand black crime and black on black crime. Now, to get to the other number, like I said earlier, 13% of the United States population is responsible for 50% of all murder on both sides of the gun. 50%. Do you know that homicide is the number one cause of death for black males aged 15 to 34, who, by the way, are the main ones dying in that big 50% number I named earlier, right? So that's why black on black crime is a thing. And that's why that number you threw out there about a white on white crime is not anything. It does not tell the full story, and it's meant to kind of stop the conversation about black on black crime. But we're not going to have that here. So I digress. Let's keep going.
So why do people always bring up black on black crime? Because it's a diversion.
Because so many black people die from it.
They're trying to prove black citizens don't have the right to be outraged about police violence because their communities have a crime problem.
Hey, last I checked, we live in a free country. You're able to be outraged at whatever you want to be outraged about. If you can't find a particular Pokemon you're looking for on your video game on your phone, you can be outraged about that. That's your prerogative to do so. We live in a free country. Go for it. But I have the right to say that you're stupid for being outraged, because there are much bigger things going on in the world rather than that very low-hanging fruit that's nearly insignificant.
But the truth is, black people are not more violent or more likely to commit crimes than anyone else.
Now, here's where we kind of get in the weeds. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that we're inherently more violent, but at the same time, I can't ignore stats. According to the numbers, we are. Now, you can say that that's because of fatherlessness. You could say it's because of whatever kind of excuse you want to give, but it doesn't matter. The stats aren't lying.
The reality is, because of a history of institutional racism, black communities have higher poverty rates, suffer from poorly funded schools, and are more likely to be targeted by police.
Also, you're going to blame white folks for us being uneducated and poor? How are they to blame for that? How was racism to blame for that? Slavery's been over for a very long time. You can't blame racism. You can't blame anything. You blame us, because if anything is to be blamed on an external source, it's the politics of a place. And many of the places that we live are all controlled by Democrats. Now, they don't want to have school choice, Democrats that is, and school choices would benefit the African-American community the most, because then we'd be able to go to a better school to get a better education. But yet and still, we vote 80% for the Democrat plantation party year after year after year. So whose fault is that? Is it a white man's fault that we continuously vote for individuals who do not have our best interests at heart? That's our fault. You can't blame a whitey for that. It's ridiculous. And targeted by police, what does that even mean, targeted? Nobody wants to target black folks, because by the numbers, you see that we're more violent. So why would anybody target a more violent person? You target the criminals that are causing the problems to protect the black community.
So are you saying blue lives don't matter? Of course the lives of cops matter. That's why if you kill a police officer, you are rightly arrested and prosecuted. But saying blue lives matter effectively lumps a profession into the same category as a marginalized group of people.
Miss Franchesca, are you from LA? You have this whole kind of game banger mentality going on. It's not like all lives matter is the blue set and then black lives matter is the black set and they're going to be on the street having turf wars. It ain't like that. To say that blue lives matter is just to break away from the whole racist divisiveness of black lives matter that wants to target the police. We've seen that in Dallas and we've seen that again in Baton Rouge. So let's just put it in proper perspective and not get on that whole black game banger LA stuff, which is ridiculous and corny, old and whack.
Becoming a police officer is an occupation. It's a choice. It's not something you're born into. And most importantly, advocating for citizens is not anti-cop. The job of police officers is to protect and serve all communities. If that's not happening, we need to reassess and find a solution. So you're saying only Black Lives Matter? That's racist.
I'm glad you see the light. Now you understand that Black Lives Matter is a racist statement. It's inherently exclusionary. When you say that Black Lives Matter, a lot of times the whole rhetoric behind it, the rhetoric that precedes it is a black only organization. I mean, we've seen them in different campuses nationwide, kicking out white folks from their little safe spaces. We've seen all kind of stuff like that. So we know that it's a racist organization. Therefore, it's a racist term. And any kind of term that is meant to say as a response is to break up the racism and divisiveness that they bring.
We've talked about this before, but this movement is not saying Black Lives Matter more than anyone else's. It's saying Black lives should matter, but the way that our justice system, our media, and our police have been operating suggests that they do not.
I mean, says who? You and the individuals in Black Lives Matter? I mean, are your opinions the only one that matter? And are your opinions actually fact? How do you really judge whether the police and the media, etc., are treating black people fairly? Maybe we think, meaning those of us that are not in Black Lives Matter, that you are not treating the police, the media, or anyone else fairly.
It's totally okay for a movement to focus on issues specific to one marginalized group. Gay bars aren't unfair to straight people. A breast cancer walk isn't unfair to other forms of cancer. And Save the Rainforest isn't saying you hate all other trees.
Well, Black Lives Matter is not like those other groups you mentioned. We know that Black Lives Matter is a very dangerous organization and they hate other people and other groups. I mean, just take a look at this here.
If they go about their burden of whatever they said you're doing, you pull your pussy out and you fucking bust that.
And this.
Blanket, fry like bacon, pigs in the blanket, fry like bacon, pigs in the blanket, fry like bacon.
So it's not like we're just taking our opinion of Black Lives Matter from nowhere. We've seen what they do and they do it consistently. Now you could say that, oh, those individuals you show on the video are not the norm in Black Lives Matter. Those are outliers. But I don't see Black Lives Matter having marches against those individuals or doing any kind of public, excommunication. I see them embrace those kind of people and make excuses for them, kind of like what you're doing right here.
To quote one law professor's letter, the subtext of Black Lives Matter is, because of the brutalizing and killing of black people at the hands of the police and the indifference of society in general and the criminal justice system in particular, it is important that we say Black Lives Matter.
Man, please, look, you have one liberal white lady virtue signaling and nothing more. That's all she's doing. She won't come live in the ghetto with me or you or anybody else. She's going to live in her mostly white area where it's safe. That's the truth. Black folks generally don't care about black folks. Now, when I say that, I'm talking about black folks that buy into the whole Black Lives Matter mantra. They don't care about black folks dying. The only time they care about black folks dying is when a white person or a police officer does it. It doesn't matter if the white person or officer was in the right or in the wrong. That is the only time they want to get up in arms about black death. But you can see that on the news every single day where I am, and in a lot of these major cities where you have a large black population, you see it every day. Black man shot, black man killed, black man shot, black man killed. That's all you see. And nobody cares until it's a white person involved or a police officer. It makes no sense to me.
But what about the white victims of police violence? There's way more of them. Yes, there are more white people killed by police officers than black people. But when you look proportionately within the populations, black Americans are 2.5 times as likely as white Americans to be shot and killed by police officers.
Yes, Miss Franchesca, that's a very accurate statistic. However, you're not giving all the numbers. See, this is kind of what you did earlier. You gave out one set of numbers and then tried to present that as a finality, but it's not. You have to understand all the numbers in order to understand that statistic, because when you place it out there without proper context of all the numbers, then people hear it. People that believe in the whole Black Lives Matter mantra, they hear that number, they see it, and they're saying, oh, blacks are being targeted by police. I mean, how do you account for the number? But what they don't know is that blacks kill 44% of officers. I have a graph on the screen before you. I think it's from 2004 until 2013. 44%, despite only being 13% of the total population. That means the percentage of police killings that we are responsible for as Black Americans is 3.3 times higher our U.S. population percentage.
Black men make up just 6% of the nation's population, but of all the unarmed people shot and killed by police in 2015, 40% of them were black men.
Well, here we are yet again. You're not giving all of the numbers. And when you don't give all the numbers, it does not give the proper context for what you're giving out. Now, when people see this number, they say, oh, wow, 6% of the population accountable for 40% of all the deaths at the hands of police officers. I mean, it doesn't look good. But then when you understand that that same population commits half of the nation's murders, then you start to kind of understand why that's so high. And like I said before, we also kill 44% of officers. So it seems kind of even, doesn't it? We kill 44% of officers and they kill 40% of us. I mean, it just kind of makes sense. Logically, it makes sense. I'm not trying to say it's an even Steven. I'm just saying it makes sense from a mathematical standpoint and nothing else.
Those numbers are tragic.
Well, I'm glad that we finally agree on something here.
If an unarmed citizen is killed by the police, or an armed citizen is killed under suspicious circumstances, people should be upset no matter what the victim's race. This isn't a competition. Sadly, police violence is a problem in many communities, but bringing up other victims to discredit the Black Lives Matter movement is pretty disingenuous. If you really believe that police violence is a problem, you should support Black Lives Matter, as well as other organizations fighting for victims and their families.
I'm gonna have to go with a big no on that. Except for the last one, I think the Innocence Project, they're pretty good at what they do. You know, they exonerate people that get convicted unjustly. I think that's a pretty good organization, but Black Lives Matter, I think not. They are a terrorist group. I don't want to talk to any kind of terrorists, whether it be Black Lives Matter, ISIS, or anybody like that. And those other ones, I don't really know about them too much, but I know what the solutions are. The solutions, because I know people want to hear that. What are your solutions? Get harder on crime, get tougher on crime, and take away the welfare state little by little, enact the whole thing that I would say is the work requirement like they did in Maine. I think Paul Lepage did that in Maine. That was a great thing he did. I would bring that back to fix a lot of these issues that we have with the black on black crime, which is a scourge sweeping the nation.
I know these conversations are hard, but they're necessary if we want to move forward.
Well, it was a good conversation, but we've come to an end. I think a lot of times when people want to have these conversations in real life, in person, from Black Lives Matter, what they really want to do, they want to have you agree with them, and whatever their extreme viewpoint is, it doesn't really matter if they say, hey, you know what, I'm the president of Moonland and I wear a cheese helmet from my crown and I want you to produce that every day for free, a new one on my head every day, and if you don't do that, you're a racist. Now, I'm being kind of silly, but that's kind of like the equivalent of what they demand. They demand silly things, and sometimes they don't demand anything. They have no real goal. They're just kind of out there doing stuff because they're allowed to do it. It's like when children get unruly and there's no discipline to actually rein them in. They just go do whatever they want to do. They run around the whole neighborhood buck wild because there's no discipline, there's no control. It's the same thing going on here with Black Lives Matter and their ilk. You know, their supporters, the white liberals, like the lady that had the whole statement that you quoted, people like that are enablers, and they just make the whole situation worse. People that block the road, a lot of white folks blocking the road, stupid stuff. All that does make the police less effective, paints a big target on their back, as we've seen what happened in Dallas and also in Baton Rouge. We see the results. We see the fruits of their unholy labor, and it's really dangerous for everyone involved, not just police officers, but the people that the officers must protect, because they are there for a reason. Just because you don't like police does not mean that you should be able to put others in harm's way because of your personal feelings, right? Go play a video game or something like that and release your tension, and don't put it out on us in the real world, because at a certain point, it's going to come backfire on you. Now, I'm not threatening anybody. Of course not. I'm just saying when you weaken the police, it makes all of us less safe from all threats, foreign and domestic. So that's all I got. I mean, so what's your opinion? Do you think that what she was saying was on point, like she had some good points? Or do you think that she did not have any good points and my rebuttal was pretty much on point and the way you think? Now, if you have any kind of additions or subtractions to what I said, let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.
Those numbers are tragic.